The day I stumbled upon the life hack that changed everything for me began like any other. I was just an average guy named Jake, working a monotonous desk job in a bustling city and barely scraping by. My apartment was small, cramped, and perpetually cluttered, a chaotic reflection of my life's trajectory. Little did I know, lurking in the depths of the internet on a mundane Tuesday afternoon, I would discover something that felt almost sacred, an insider's guide to life improvement, buried within a thread titled Ask Reddit What's a Life Hack So Good You Almost Don't Want to Share It? As I read through the comments, most of which comprised people sharing their mediocre tips like freezing grapes for chillin' wine, I almost tuned out, but then I found it, a simple yet profound suggestion that promised to revolutionize my approach to work and life in general. Set your alarm to wake up exactly 1 hour earlier every day. Your productivity and mental clarity will skyrocket. I was doubtful at first, rolled my eyes at the idea of sacrificing an hour of sleep, but I couldn't shake the thought. After wrestling with my own frustrations about work and feeling like a ship lost at sea, I resolved to give it a shot. The first morning was an exercise in pure dread as my alarm screamed at me from across the room. Each minute of extra dark, quiet solitude felt like a battle against my will to stay under the covers, but the slight glow of a new dawn soon coaxed me into action. I brewed a pot of coffee that smelled like a promise fulfilled, sat down at my rickety kitchen table, and, for the first time in ages, opened my laptop to write. I poured out my thoughts, projects I had ideas for but never the energy to start, and plans I had shelved away like dusty books. And that first week of waking up early transformed my life. I began each day with purpose, finding hours that had previously slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. My productivity soared, and my mental health felt lighter, free from the weight of procrastination that had shackled me for years. You might say it was euphoric. I found a rhythm, a harmony with the world. I was able to exercise, meditate, read more, a zen oasis amid my chaotic existence. But as the days turned into weeks, I faced an unexpected dilemma that sent ripples through my newfound routine. My older brother, Tom, who had always been my confidant and trusted ally, doted on me during our weekly catch-ups, but recently, I noticed a growing concern etched across his face. One sunny Saturday, when we met up for coffee, he hesitated before speaking. "Jake, this is the third weekend in a row that you've been too busy for dinner with the family. Can we talk about it?" The guilt hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream that this new lifestyle was essential for my well-being, but instead, I waded through the rising disappointment in his voice. I had suddenly become this creature of habit, my joys tethered to early mornings. But in doing so, had I cut off the companionship I'd cherished with my brother? I sank into a quiet internal storm, sliding between being proud of my improvements and grappling with the social rift they caused. After days of self-reflection, I realized I needed a balance, a compromise that would allow me to retain the tranquility of my mornings while still nurturing my important relationships. I resolved to give Tom a call that evening, and after an honest conversation filled with apologies and explanations, a truce was formed. Rather than abandon my new routine, we agreed on Sunday dinners, where we could catch up without intrusion. I could have my productivity without forsaking my family, an ideal fusion of my previous and present selves. It was a delicate harmony, one that came from understanding the deeper implications of my choices, and it transformed our relationship back into its former warmth. And so, as the seasons shifted and with them, my mornings evolved into sacred rituals rather than just productivity fueled by desperation. I discovered the clarity of thought that dreams and conversations shared over meals can lead to, a tangible surplus of joy that exceeded the figurative weight in hours gained. A few weeks passed, each morning becoming a grounding part of my routine, infusing my soul with energy. One evening, I found myself sitting on my couch, looking out at the world tinted by dusk, and I reflected on how sharing my newfound life hack had cultivated a multitude of connections, unexpected friendships blossoming where I had once dwelled in solitude. Life had its way of reminding me of the interconnections we often overlook. As I sit here typing this, I wonder if sharing my hack was indeed a good idea. It blurs the line of private joy and communal upliftment. Would the power I found in those early mornings hold the same sacred space if I distributed it freely? Maybe one life hack isn't meant to be kept a secret but shared, reshaped, and transformed through the experiences of every person who dares to wake up to life's offering in their own unique way. And as I concluded my thoughts, I realized the most poignant truth of all: sometimes a simple life hack opens the door not just to personal growth, but to richer bonds, deeper understanding, and a redefined sense of purpose, inviting us to embrace it all without reservation, life's essentials mingling with its greatest treasures. As I sat in the soft glow of the morning sun filtering through the kitchen window, I felt a sense of calm settle around me. My mind, though racing with the implications of what I had just thought, was juxtaposed against the sheer beauty of the day awakening outside. The world felt intoxicatingly fresh, a canvas waiting for the gentle strokes of life that I was slowly beginning to understand. You see, the life hack I stumbled upon didn't involve any fancy apps or complicated productivity systems, but rather an uncomplicated shift in perspective. I had learned that sometimes, the most mundane ritual, waking up with intention, could, in its own quiet way, transform the trajectory of my day, my relationships, and my joy. Over the past few months, I had experimented with this idea, rising earlier than I was accustomed to, before the chaos of the world invaded my peaceful sanctuary. It began as a desperate attempt to reclaim time from my perpetual morning rush, an irritation born from the mundane trappings of life, scrolling through emails, hurried breakfasts, and the nagging sense that I was losing precious moments to start afresh. But that diligent push to wake up earlier unfurled into something far richer. As I carved out an hour before the day's demands stole my attention, I found a space to breathe. I moved in slow motion, making a warm cup of tea, journaling about my thoughts and dreams, and even meditating in the quiet embrace of my home. Each sip of that warm beverage would wrap around me like a gentle hug, reinforcing my resolve to step into the day with clarity, purpose, and an open heart. Honestly, it felt extraordinary, like I was gifted a secret chamber of time where worries could not penetrate and the weight of expectation floated away. I began to notice how this small act of self-care rippled through the hours ahead of me. I was more present during breakfast with my family, more patient with the unpredictable whims of children, and more engaged in conversations that I used to let flow past me like white noise. It was as if I had donned a new pair of glasses, sharpening details in my perspective I had long dismissed. I reveled in quiet drives to work and greeted colleagues with renewed warmth. However, with this blossoming joy emerged an unexpected hesitation. Was this secret ritual of mine meant to be shared? Would revealing my newfound treasure dilute its magic or, worse, inspire envy or misunderstanding? Caught in this internal tug-of-war, I decided to experiment subtly. Over weekends, when my husband joined me for those early hours, I invited him into my sanctuary, sharing the solace I had discovered. In those hushed moments, I saw his demeanor soften, emerging from the chaos of past weeks where work had consumed our evenings. Slowly he began to cherish those serene mornings too, our laughter dancing in the air as we shared breakfast and exchanged dreams. It was this bond, the laughter, the vulnerability, the growth, that made me wonder whether this small act of kindness and clarity could be a gift, not just for ourselves, but for others. Wanting to share this idea, I took to a popular online forum one night and posed a question in a chat titled Ask Reddit, "What's a life hack so good you almost don't want to share it?" I wrote about my morning ritual, careful to frame it not as a command or an obligation but as a suggestion for those yearning for a little space of their own. What followed was a serendipitous avalanche of responses. People poured in with stories of their own rituals, ways of reclaiming time, or tips to savor the morning before the world demanded their attention. I felt electrified with connection, strangers resonating with the quiet rebellion of choosing to wake up to love and life, not burdens. A woman wrote about her late-night tea and early morning walks, while a young man spoke of the meticulous joy he found in preparing breakfast for his family, intertwining love with fried eggs and crispy bacon. Each anecdote was like a thread stitching our various experiences into a tapestry of shared humanity. Still, the most illuminating response came from a thoughtful user whose simple message lingered in my mind: how do we awaken not just ourselves but those around us? I paused to reflect on it. This was precisely what my mornings had begun to teach me, to acquire wisdom, not just for myself but to nurture in others, to invite them into that space of calm creativity. Perhaps this life hack was never meant to be hoarded but rather to flourish in the connections it could foster. As I gradually let my secret spread, I found excitement in conversations with friends, inviting them to join me for early coffee dates, sharing my early rising practice, and encouraging them to discover their mornings anew. There was a palpable change in every one of us, an impromptu movement driven by shared mindfulness that rippled through our tight-knit circle. With laughter echoing through the early hours and stories unfolding over steaming mugs, I witnessed a blossoming camaraderie and intimacy rekindled. And so, the life hack I once hesitated to share morphed into something far grander, an experience that encouraged vulnerability, creativity, and warmth and redefined the essence of connection among ourselves and others. In this beautiful harmonic dance of shared morning moments, we wove our own intricate narrative, revealing the most poignant truth of all: Sometimes secrets hold power, but freely shared wisdom holds even more. As I sit here now, bathed in the dawn's tender light, I no longer hoard the essence of my early mornings but celebrate with gratitude the community it nurtured, filled with the promise of new beginnings, like the sun that rises each day. And as I write this reflection, quietly surrendering to sleep, I know I've opened a door not just to myself but to others' unique journeys, each sunrise a reminder that some treasures are meant to be shared, forever reshaping the lives of those around us. As the first hints of daylight filtered through my window, casting soft shadows on the walls, I felt a profound tranquility settle over me, a quiet understanding of how interconnected our experiences can be. It had been months since I chose to share my secret, a life hack that had transformed my mornings and inadvertently, my relationships. It started as a small confession on a Reddit thread, tagged under Ask Reddit, where users opened up about their favorite secrets and life hacks. My comment had been simple: I wake up an hour earlier than everyone else, and it's changed my life. Of course, I hadn't anticipated the ripple effect it would create. I expected a few nods of agreement, perhaps some disbelief at how such a minor change could yield significant results. But the floodgates opened, and I was caught in a tidal wave of responses. People shared their stories of early mornings, how they found peace in a world that often felt chaotic, how sacred the stillness was compared to the rush of the day to come. At first, I felt a tinge of vulnerability, exposing my personal routine to a community of strangers. Would they understand? Was I laying claim to a secret that was too trivial to be meaningful? But the responses flooded in, each one echoing thoughts I had quietly held inside. Stories of newfound hobbies developed in those quiet hours, like painting or journaling, flourished alongside the feelings of guilt and joy many expressed about wanting more time to themselves before diving into the responsibilities of life. Slowly, I realized that my early mornings were akin to an unpolished gem, and by sharing my experience, I had opened a treasure chest full of kindness and connection. As I engaged with the community, a gentle rhythm emerged through our exchanges. People were inspired to wake earlier not just to chase dreams but to embrace silence, to savor coffee while contemplating their lives before the world's demands encroached on their time. Some created morning routines with family, turning what was once a solitary practice into a bonding experience. Reading through their accounts felt like stealing snippets of colorful lives, weaving my narrative into theirs, forming a tapestry of collective growth. I recall a comment from a woman named Sarah, who shared how incorporating this life hack reignited her marriage. They began waking up together, sharing soft conversations in the bleak morning light that often devolved into earnest laughter, ineffably transforming their relationship. There was another user, an older gentleman, who revealed he attended to his garden during those early quiet moments, nurturing life in a different sense, finding solace in the blooming flowers that awaited him as the world awoke. Yet, beneath the exchanges of inspiration lay something deeper, a shared understanding that life holds profound beauty in stillness. With each story that unfolded, I felt the walls I had unknowingly built around myself begin to fracture. I had always been one to enjoy my solitude, scavenging for pockets of time to breathe before buzzing phones and demanding schedules came crashing in. And perhaps I had feared that opening those sacred doors would lead to chaos and noise, leeching away the personal serenity I had so cherished. But as strangers opened their hearts in response to my simple revelation, I realized how wrong I had been. As the comments continued flowing in, I decided to organize an early morning meetup in our local park. It felt like an uncharted venture, but curious optimism thrived within me. To my surprise, dozens of people showed up, some I recognized by their usernames, others who I would only know for that brief moment in time. We gathered like old friends at the edge of a sprawling green oasis, a burgeoning community nurtured by the dawn's embrace. With coffee in hand and sleepy smiles on our faces, we shared our stories, forging connections I hadn't considered possible. Every cup raised was a toast not just to transformation but to the unity of our shared humanity, scratches and bruises in varying degrees merging with triumphs that painted our lives. Days turned into weeks, and as the seasons changed, so did our meetings. Some mornings we delve into reflective mindfulness exercises or guided meditation, others were filled with laughter and shared breakfast picnics. I noticed people blooming in ways they had never anticipated. Friendships emerged, and collaborations formed outside of our gathering. One morning, as I inhaled the scent of fresh pastries baking in the sun, I marveled at how this simple life hack had reshaped not only my routine but the essence of so many lives intertwined with mine. Looking back now, those early mornings were more than just a clever trick, they were an invitation to vulnerability, revealing the subtle art of connection and the beauty of shared existence. As I finally closed my eyes in surrender to sleep, I allow the memory of those gathered faces to wash over me, a gentle lullaby assuring me that life, in all its complexities, is best lived together. In the silence that follows, I reflect on the responsibilities we hold, not just to ourselves, but to each other. Some mornings I still wake to the solitude I cherish, but now, they carry the warmth of a community that blossomed from a single whisper of truth, with the promise to continually evolve. And as dawn breaks, I remember that sharing treasures can illuminate the depth of life's experiences across the vast tapestry of humanity, each thread woven intimately yet distinctively into a grand narrative of our existence. The first time I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me at the office was a Tuesday morning, just after I'd refilled my coffee for the third time. I'd been with the federal government for nearly a decade, and while I loved the sense of purpose that came with serving the public, the lingering tension in the air lately felt palpable, almost like a living entity hovering above every email and conversation. It wasn't just me. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones about changing policies and shifting priorities, each day seeming laced with uncertainty. I was a junior analyst in the Department of Health and Human Services, and my job had always been about drowning in data but finding comfort in the mission, to ensure the well-being of our community. But in the past few months, that mission felt compromised, diluting into the political fray that churned silently around us. It was a typical day, the kind that felt achingly monotonous, dotted by the buzz of fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. Yet, amidst the predictability, a low hum of anxiety snaked through the office, and I found myself endlessly tapping at my keyboard, attempting to focus on my reports. My desk was cluttered with printed research, sticky notes scribbled with reminders, but my mind drifted toward a conversation I'd overheard between two senior colleagues. They were debating the whisper of budget cuts, and whether recent changes in administration would affect funding for the health programs that had been my focus. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, flickering vulnerability like a neon sign in darkened streets. The success of the initiatives I was so passionate about was on shaky ground, and I couldn't shake the thoughts of the families who relied on these programs, all while grappling with my own ambition. I wanted to rise in my career, to advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves, yet fear crawled beneath my skin, a reminder that I needed to tread carefully. After a long day, when the sunset stained the skyscrapers outside my window with warm hues, I felt a sudden, desperate urge to connect with my peers. Taking a breath, I shot a message into our office group chat, just curious, what's the mood like these days? The response was immediate, a flood of uncertainty and fear cascaded in. It's rough, one colleague admitted, echoing my hidden turmoil, I just don't know how long we can keep this up. Another added, the higher-ups seem lost. I felt a sense of camaraderie bonding us, yet the tension climbed, thick and suffocating. I had always valued open discussions, believing they produced solutions, but this felt different, a confrontation with shadows rather than a rally toward collective strength. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, discussions began to swirl about potential layoffs and department restructures. I barely noticed the changing colors of autumn outside our windows as my focus narrowed on the fear-driven thoughts bottlenecking my creativity. One evening, as I sat alone in my car before heading home, I received an email from an upper management figure, something about a meeting the following week. The subject line was enough to send adrenaline pumping through my veins, reassessing organizational structure. My heart raced as I scanned the office lobby, eyes meeting colleagues, all wearing similar masks of uncertainty. Anxiety tightened its grip, and I decided to reach out to one of my closest colleagues, Leah, who shared my worries. We met after work at a small coffee shop down the street, both of us searching for solace in the warmth of chamomile tea. I formulated a brief strategy in my mind, a small glimmer of hope for restoring our shared sense of purpose. But as I shared my concerns, Leah sighed, the flickering light of a candle casting long shadows on her face. It's not just about us losing our jobs, it's about the lives that depend on our work, she said, her voice cracking slightly. That statement echoed in my mind, guiding my thoughts toward a deeper commitment. In the following days, I finally made a choice. I could either remain a passive observer or take an active role in our shifting landscape. I organized a small lunch discussion with the office, a chance for us to speak honestly about our fears, hopes, and the future of our services. When the day came, I stood nervously at the front of the conference room, surrounded by familiar faces, and allowed vulnerability to flow through me as I shared my own anxieties about our mission being lost amidst political games. To my surprise, they opened up in return, sharing stories that intertwined their lives with those of the people we served. What began as a timid discussion transformed into a heartfelt exchange that lifted the invisible weight off our shoulders. As stories unfolded, it became not merely a session of venting, but a renewal of our collective commitment to those we served. I noticed smiles breaking through the grim facade, expressions of shared purpose guiding me through to a dimension of hope. Weeks passed, and while the winds of change continued to blow harshly outside, we found security in our bond. The meeting I had dreaded arrived unexpectedly. However, it turned out that our shared spirit had sparked an initiative that returned focus to our core objectives and revitalized commitments. The leadership recognized the depths of our work, and slowly, the tide began to shift. The ultimate resolution felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater for far too long. In the end, while uncertainty still loomed on the horizon, we had formed an unbreakable support network which kindled a flame of resilience that would carry us forward. Looking back, there was grace to be found in those moments of vulnerability that led to such reaffirming transformation. And just like that, amidst the cacophony of office life, we discovered that connection and openness can weather even the most tempestuous storms. After all, in the humdrum routine of the federal government, it was the shared understanding of our mission that ultimately tethered us together. A month later, as I draft this, I can't help but reflect on how fear morphed into fortitude. Those who once felt mute in the silence learned to vocalize their passion, thus finding strength in community, and in time, I understood that my greatest narrative wasn't just about the bureaucratic machinery, but about people, and the stories that bind us all together. When I look back on that month in the cavernous halls of the federal building, it's strange how the discomfort of uncertainty transformed into something approaching grace. I remember the first time I overheard two colleagues in the break room, their voices a beautiful blend of laughter and understanding. There was Kelly, a mid-level analyst with an incredible knack for predicting policy trends, and James, whose deadpan humor often masked an extraordinary dedication to his work. They were engaged in a spirited debate about the merits of a new regulation, but instead of leading them to the usual corporate competition, it sparked an affiliation that felt far more enriching. It was in those casual moments where we leaned into vulnerability and authenticity that shifted our energy. I can't help but smile at how we began to celebrate small victories by bringing in homemade treats on Fridays, transforming mundane workdays into little havens of connection. We would gather around the kitchen table, laden with cookies, fruit platters, and an occasional leftover casserole. Sharing food felt like the oldest and simplest gesture of closeness. Secretly, we all hoped these interactions would bolster us against the heaviness of our duties, which often seemed to stack higher as the stream of regulations poured in from the top. Amidst the ever-present talk of budgets and deadlines, deeper conversations about life outside the office sprung forth. I learned that James was going through a rough patch with his wife, and amid the company banter that surfaced from the shared snacks, he allowed himself to share his worries. Kelly, in her gentle yet tenacious manner, proffered advice, sharing how community gardens had nurtured her connection with neighbors and, in turn, helped her grow a sense of belonging. Listening to these stories became my solace. In this network of souls thrown together by duty, I found my voice and a purpose that exceeded the sum of our tasks. We were threading our stories into a larger mosaic that was both personal and communal, an unexpected demonstration of resilience that extended beyond project deadlines. Yet, amidst this blooming camaraderie, unrest lurked in the shadows of our building, infiltrating my peace. Rumors had begun swirling about budget cuts that would target our department. The stress accumulated like spring rain, a quiet weight upon the shoulders of my coworkers, and I could see it in the faces of even my most spirited colleagues. Kelly lost her typical enthusiasm, her smiles roaming further into the realm of forced gestures. I could sense the hive mind forming again, the collective fear that, like a rising tide, would wash over the connections we had spent weeks nurturing. During one of those moments, after the customary Friday snack session, I gathered the courage to speak up. What if we, as a team, host an informal meeting to air our thoughts? To strategize how we can articulate our worth to the higher-ups? Silence wrapped around us for a heartbeat before the murmur of agreement started to build. James nodded, wiping crumbs from his fingers as he offered to draft an agenda, while Kelly suggested we invite others from different departments, illustratively bolstering our diverse strengths. The week that followed became transformative. Those sessions were more than a meeting of minds, they were a heartbeat. Each voice harmonized with urgency and relief, intertwining resumes and success stories, defiantly tethering us to our mission and our value. As we drew closer to our presentation to senior management, I watched as Kelly and James regained their spark, radiating conviction that pulsed through our group. The day we presented came like a soft sunrise, nervously bright yet filled with potential. Stepping into that conference room, I felt a tide of collective strength wash over me, calming the nerves that had clawed at my stomach. The discussions flowed freely. It was more than just facts and figures. We painted a picture of our responsibilities, their impact, and how each of us was a thread in the intricate fabric of our organization. By the end, we left the room with heartbeats echoing off the walls, and although it was too soon to gauge the repercussion of our efforts, the liberation of our voices echoed in the corridors far beyond that day. Looking back, I knew the journey hadn't just been one of advocacy for our work but a profound understanding of connection and the ways in which we could support each other in the face of uncertainty. A few weeks later, we received the news that funding would be reallocated, and while we weren't entirely out of the woods, our department would remain intact for the time being. There was cheer and relief among us, and I was overcome with a sense of purpose I hadn't anticipated. As we celebrated, surrounded by laughter and the remnants of a potluck, I realized my narrative had grown beyond my initial fears of bureaucratic red tape. My greatest takeaway wasn't the survival of our department, it was the unexpected gift of community. And so, as I sit here reflecting, the threads weaving through our lives, a blend of doubt, resilience, compassion, and hope, remind me that, ultimately, it wasn't just about doing one's job well, but rather discovering the power of our collective stories that fortified our mission. Update: several months later, the camaraderie remains. The workings of the federal government can still feel daunting at times, but we've found a rhythm. Recently, Kelly organized a book club focusing on various genres, and while our discussions often wade through the waters of policy, they now reflect the broader human experience we are all navigating together. I think of how far we've come and know that in our own quiet little corner of the bureaucracy, we're crafting not just policies but lasting friendships that will endure long after budgets are reviewed. And in that, I find comfort, always looking forward to the stories yet to be told. In this newfound camaraderie, each gathering became a gentle reminder that the monotony of government life could blossom into something more profound and rich. Our book club meetings transformed from mandatory coffee breaks into indulgent explorations of literature and philosophy, with everyone silently celebrating their chance to share and engage in a sanctuary that was far removed from metrics, deadlines, and surveillance. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the tall office windows, painting the concrete space in hues of gold, we delved into a collection of short stories that explored the essence of humanity, tales of triumph, tragedy, and everything in between. It was here, amidst the laughter and solemn pauses, that I shared my own story, one that I had kept tucked away in my heart for years. I spoke of my arrival in Washington, D.C., a young idealist fresh out of college, bloom-stunted by the stark realization that reality was less about the uplifting calls for change I had imagined and more about routing paperwork and navigating through labyrinthine regulations. The room fell silent as I described the day I sat in my office, staring at a stack of files that felt like a mountain, discouraging me from moving forward. I shared the moment when I had considered walking away, feeling invisible in a sea of formality, only to encounter an older colleague, Mr. Henderson, who would change my perspective forever. Those words ignited something within our group, a realization that we were all merely figures in a vast sea, collectively struggling to keep our heads above water. And then, as if stirred by an unseen current, others began to share their own fears and aspirations, the young intern working late-night shifts while juggling classes, the single mother striving for stability, the long-time employee fighting to keep optimism alive in a world that felt all too often heavy with cynicism. Each voice was distinct yet harmonized into a beautiful cacophony of vulnerability, weaving threads of connection between us. It struck me then how our small gathering, initially viewed as just another obligation, had become a tapestry of shared experiences, stitched together by empathy and understanding. Weeks turned into months, and each meeting deepened our bond, eclipsing the original intent of simply escaping the office grind. We began to celebrate birthdays, organize potlucks, and even staged mini poetry slams, where we poured our hearts into verses that dared to question the very fabric of our lives. In those moments, the warp and weft of our daily government duties became laden with the richness of humanity. It was refreshing to hear laughter and see the glint in our eyes when we allowed ourselves to be just people, stripped of titles and responsibilities. However, the peace was disrupted one Wednesday. Just as we settled into our routine, an email pinged across our screens announcing budget cuts, deep, suffocating cuts that would ripple through our departments, threatening jobs and projects. The collective sigh that followed was palpable, settling like fog in the air. I felt my heart sink as I glanced around the room, meeting the worried eyes of my colleagues. What had blossomed felt suddenly fragile, as though one gust of wind could scatter our fledgling community. After a tense discussion, rather than growing weary, we resolved to hold each other up. This time, we would not linger in silence. In the days that followed, we became a fortress. Inspired by our honest discussions, we rallied together, strategizing how to advocate for our team and the services we provided. Fueled by our connections, we wrote letters, organized meetings, and shared stories of the real impact our work had on ordinary lives. The pages of policy we lived in were not merely lines and clauses, they had substance, shaped by the moments of joy, support, and connection we cultivated daily. Our efforts did not go unnoticed. Slowly, perspective shifted as senior management began to recognize the value of our united voices. Though the process was harrowing, our resilience became evident. We engaged with those across departments, sharing insights, proving that the threads of connection woven through our book club extended far beyond our intimate gatherings. They formed a lifeline to the larger community. Gradually, the budgets were revised, and while some cuts remained inevitable, our department emerged transformed by solidarity. Looking back now, I realize that these challenging moments were not merely obstacles, they were vital threads that added depth to our narrative, a reminder of the power inherent in shared experiences and common goals. As I sit here, reflecting on the past few months, I understand that what began as an avenue for escaping the monotony of bureaucracy evolved into a powerful testament to our humanity. I've learned that when we stand together, even the most daunting bureaucratic machinery can be rendered manageable through connection, laughter, and shared stories. In conclusion, I feel a bittersweet tug at my heart as I contemplate what lies ahead. Our tales continue to unfold, each day filled with new chapters that I can't help but look forward to embracing. Who knows what stories we will create next? For now, I find solace in knowing I am not alone in this journey. In the warmth of our shared experiences, the spirit of our community thrives, untouched by the challenges that loom outside the walls of our office, reminding us that we are, ultimately, the authors of our own narrative. There's a certain thrill that comes from the idea of having a carefree night in a wildly adventurous setting, free from the judgments of the everyday world, and I had always fantasized about what it would be like to be caught in a whirlwind romance with a stranger in an exotic locale. That thought lingered in the back of my mind for years, stoked by the countless movies I consumed and the endless stories floating through my social circles. But when I finally found the courage to act on one of my fantasies, I discovered the harsh realities lurking just beneath the surface. It all started when I moved to a new city after college, where everything felt fresh and full of promise. I had just landed a new job that required frequent travel, mostly to glamorous destinations, and one night in Barcelona, after a long day of meetings, I decided to embrace the moment. The warm night air was alive with music and laughter, and I was drawn into a crowded bar pulsating with energy. There, I met him, a charismatic artist with a mischievous glint in his eye and an accent that made my knees weak. He was everything my fantasies had promised, charming, spontaneous, and utterly intoxicating. We danced under the low lights, sharing stories that wove our lives together while the world faded around us. I felt alive for the first time in ages, intoxicated not just by the sangria but by the possibility that I was shedding my mundane reality for something vibrant and exhilarating. As the night deepened, he leaned in closer, whispering promises of adventure and intimacy. I could feel the tension sparking between us, a magnetic pull that made my heart race. Finally, in a haze of desire, we left the bar together, stumbling through dimly lit streets towards the nearest hotel, our laughter echoing off the cobblestones. But as the dawn broke over the city, the fantasy began to unravel. The morning light highlighted the disarray of my choice, and the artist wasn't the smooth romantic I'd pictured. His carefree facade slipped as he started talking about his commitments, his art, and his struggles with mental health. I felt the heavy weight of reality settle over us like a thick fog. Instead of a wild escape, I found myself in a deep discussion that made me acutely aware of the fragility of our encounter. I wanted to run, but there was compassion bubbling within me, urging me to listen and be present, and I struggled with the genuine connection contrasting starkly with the idealized moment I'd envisioned. I felt a rush of panic as I realized that this whirlwind had become a wave threatening to drown me. I was falling for the man behind the fantasy, not just the figure in my dreams, and as we talked, I was faced with the choice of whether to embrace this new reality or cling to the illusion of a carefree evening. Ultimately, I chose connection over escapism. We shared our fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities, and while we parted ways at noon, exchanging hesitant smiles and promises to keep in touch, I was left contemplating the nature of my fantasy and the truth we often overlook. Reflecting on that night, I realized that sometimes fantasies are not merely about pleasure or thrill, they can reveal deeper truths about ourselves, our yearnings for connection, understanding, and shared experience. I returned home feeling both liberated and unsettled, admiring how life rarely unfolds according to our plans. I don't think I'll ever forget him or the raw authenticity of our meeting. A few months later, I received a message from him, a simple "How are you?" followed by a photo of a new painting he'd created, something he claimed was inspired by our conversation. I smiled, knowing that the reality was so much richer than the fantasy, and wondered how many others were out there, living in the shadows of their own dreams. As I reflected on that night, I felt a sense of warmth, realizing that it wasn't a nightmare but a beautiful awakening, one that taught me to cherish the imperfections that make life so compelling. The days turned into weeks, and our exchanges evolved into something more profound. Each message from him felt like a gentle ripple in the still waters of my life, nudging me awake from the humdrum routine I had settled into. We shared fragments of our worlds, documenting every laugh, every desire, and every brush of vulnerability that came alive in our conversations. I began to look forward to our nightly chats, my heart dancing at the thought of unveiling the layers of his mind, and I started weaving him into my dreams. The reality was intoxicating, contrasting sharply with the fantasies I had once indulged in, where everything was steamy and perfect, a performance crafted to delight. This was different, it was raw and authentic, filled with the potential for connection and depth rather than mere physical encounters. There was a kind of magic in the imperfections that crept into our exchanges, like when I stumbled over my words, or he shared a painting that seemed incomplete, an echo of whispers and lines that spoke loudly, but lacked the finish and polish I had envisioned. One evening, during one of our lengthy dialogues, I felt the urge to broach the subject of reality. I wanted to tread carefully, though, knowing how easily dreams can shatter under the weight of expectations. "What do you think about exploring our fantasies further?" I typed, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send, the question hanging in the digital air between us like a conversation held at a cafe, the scent of coffee and pastries wafting around us. I braced myself. Would he take it as a playful suggestion, or would he see it for what it was, a gentle nudge toward the frayed edges of reality? His reply came quicker than I anticipated, a simple "I've thought about it too. But part of me fears losing what we have." Those words echoed in my mind for days. We were treading on a precipice, hovering between the perfect fantasy we had built and the genuine connection that was blossoming. Part of me wanted to dive headfirst into the chaos of it all, to explore every nuance of our desires, to drunk press those fantasies into reality. But another part of me clung desperately to the warmth and safety of our words. What if the tangibility of our dreams bled the colors out of what was already vivid? The notion of it being a nightmare replayed in my thoughts. It was so easy to dance around the idea of passion when it was wrapped tightly in the cocoon of screens and distance. But what if when stripped bare, the reality fell flat, an unfinished painting revealed under the hard light of day? Eventually, after scribbling tentative messages in my mind, I took a deep breath and pressed forward. "What do you want to see happen?" The question was a leap into the unknown, and I felt lighter yet heavier with the weight of it. I wondered if I caught a hint of hesitation in his response, a flicker of uncertainty that made my heart race and pulse thud against my chest. "I want to get to know the real you, beyond the words," he wrote, and I felt an overwhelming warmth spread within me, a craving that stretched beyond mere physicality. Weeks passed, our dialogues traversed the spectrum of feelings, ranging from innocent musings on artistic inspiration to deep dives into the intricacies of commitment. We lost ourselves in stories of past loves, future dreams, and those midnight confessions that spilled out like secrets beneath the stars. Yet, I sensed a contention hanging over us, a question we were avoiding. I could almost hear it, that whisper of destiny. What would it mean to turn this cartoonish dream of skinny dipping in a warm ocean into a picturesque illusion? And then, one rainy evening in late autumn, a soft invitation came nudging into my inbox. "How about meeting in person?" The proposition shimmered before me like the glow of an uncertain flame, and I found myself grinning, then quickly frowning. My heart raced, anticipation clawing at my insides. Could I step into the canvas we'd painted together, or was that the moment when everything would dissolve? I could almost see it, the fantasy stretching out like a beautiful, uncharted horizon before me, pulling me in, while simultaneously pushing me away with the heavy weight of reality. Days of contemplation curled around me like smoke, each twist and turn of thought compelling me onward until I had crafted a response that both terrified and thrilled me. Yes. It hung in my mind like a fragile spell, one word laden with promise and dread. We settled on a small art gallery nestled on the quiet outskirts of town, a space drenched in creative energy, where the paintings were lively, and the atmosphere felt ethereal, scattering the lingering doubts like scattered leaves in the wind. The day of our meeting arrived, and 1,000 butterflies danced in my stomach as I entered the gallery, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the smells of rain and warming spices. The initial thrill fluttering in my chest was marred with a thick layer of apprehension. Would we get lost in each other's eyes, or was I stepping into an awkward situation destined to slip back into the shadows? But then I saw him, standing just beneath a sprawling canvas, blue in swirls of deeper hues that echoed the depths of my mind. Our eyes met, and the world faded into a quiet hum. The moment was surreal, bursting with an intensity I had not anticipated. We spent those hours enveloped in conversation, laughter echoing in the small space. I shared thoughts on art, he chuckled at my nervous stumbles, and for every word we exchanged, I felt the invisible thread tying us draw tighter. We painted a new story together, one that was only beginning to emerge from the canvas of our dreams, no longer constrained by the pixels that had connected us. When our hands brushed, I felt warm currents of electricity. It was clear that we were both aware of the tightrope we walked above an abyss of uncertainty, but the magic of the moment kept us tethered. As the evening wound down and twilight seeped into the gallery, we stepped outside, the world outside appearing softer, illuminated under the gentle glow of street lamps. A wave of real, tangible affection washed over me, fueling the moment with a quiet, electrifying promise. There was no fantasy tearing at the seams, no crumbling reality demanding attention. Just two people taking a chance, creating a story marked not by the typical markers of romance or lust, but by the foundations of honesty and friendship. Months later, I lay in bed, replaying the memories of his laughter and our first meaningful kiss, still enveloped in the sweetness of that night. What could have easily devolved into a nightmare instead turned into the core of a thriving journey, one that transformed our shared dreams into a fragile reality, delicate yet beautiful. With every shared moment and vulnerability, we crafted a version of ourselves that was, and always would be, infinitely richer than anything I had found before, reminding me that sometimes it's the unpredictable chaos of life that blooms into the kind of connection we often yearn for in our fantasies. And as I drifted off to sleep, I allowed the bittersweet wonder of it all to embrace me. In the quiet chambers of my mind, shadows of the past faded, replaced with the whispers of dreams yet to be realized, knowing fully that those fantasies, when touched by honesty, could morph into something stunningly, satisfyingly real. That night marked a turning point in my life, each thought spiraling gracefully into the next as I imagined the small changes I could embrace. I often found myself daydreaming about our conversation, the flow of ideas, the laughter interwoven with vulnerability. It became a tapestry of emotions that I would revisit on quiet evenings when the world outside dimmed into a soft glow. I replayed his words, the way he spoke about art and humanity. Folding my own little insecurities into the fabric of our connection, feeling a sense of permission to embrace my chaotic self. Days turned into weeks, and it astonished me how something so serendipitous could linger like the taste of a fine wine, warm and intoxicating. Every text he sent painted another layer in my mind, a canvas I didn't know I had, each exchange revealing the raw essence of two souls entangled in shared dreams. I began to see my life differently. Instead of the linear paths I had always walked, I found myself wandering into serendipitous alleys of adventure and self-discovery. Then, one evening, as rain drizzled softly against my window panes, my phone buzzed with a familiar rhythm. It was him again, this time asking if I'd like to see his latest exhibit, a showcase he had planned for months in a quaint gallery downtown. My heart raced at the thought. Compared to the previous vague illusions of intimacy through our screens, this was a real-world challenge, a shift from fantasy to reality, a chance to interact beyond the confines of our carefully curated words. I hesitated, nervous about stepping out of my comfort zone. What if we encountered the rawness of existence that often lay beyond the realm of our beautiful exchanges? What if it didn't measure up, shattering the soft cocoon we had spun around each other? But the allure of authenticity won the battle within, and I found myself standing before the gallery a few days later, curiosity blooming inside me as I entered the softly lit space. Colors danced on the walls, each painting embodying a story I hadn't lived, but could feel resonating deep within my heart. And there he was, standing proud amidst his canvases, a mix of nervousness and passion radiating from him like a beacon. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, the world around us faded. It was just the two of us, our connection flourishing amidst the strokes of paint and splashes of color. As we navigated through his works, he explained the inspiration behind each piece, his passion electric. I shared my thoughts too, hesitant but emboldened by the beauty around us and the contrast of our conversations that had now grown into something palpable. Yet, amidst the joy of discovery, I noticed a peculiar unease creeping in, a recognition of the thin line we were treading between fantasy and our very real lives. Suddenly, the idealistic images I had conjured up began to waver, revealing the intricacies of human connection that were not always as simple as they appeared in my dreams. It happened during a soft, spontaneous laugh shared over one of his more abstract pieces, which to me seemed chaotic and whimsical, yet to him symbolized the emotional wreckage of lost love and anger. In that moment, the laughter curdled slightly, revealing glimpses of his real-world complexity. As he bore his soul, shadows flickered in his eyes, hints of struggles and disappointments that his art had masked until now. The fantasy I had wrapped around him of the flawless artist who could lead me into a world painted with sunshine, began to reveal a semblance of darkness that mirrored my own. Feeling a rush of vulnerability, I opened up too, speaking of my own tribulations, the tightrope of expectations holding me hostage in my own life. As the evening unfolded, the layers of our conversations peeled back, leaving room for honesty but also a sense of hesitance, an unsteady dance of vulnerability that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Our connection deepened that night but was underscored by the ever-present reminder of our fears and insecurities, that perhaps the very beauty we sought was intertwined with the truths we often shied away from. And finally, as we exited the gallery, the gentle rain had morphed into a light drizzle, cascading down like whispered confessions. Walking side by side without a clear destination, I realized it was okay to embrace the unknown, finding solace in the warmth of his presence. The night felt alive, charged with the potential for shared dreams but also the weight of reality pressing down on us. As we reached a quiet park, the moonlight spilled across the grass, illuminating a space where we could stand still for a moment, allowing the hum of the city to fade into the background. I turned to look at him, and in the silent exchange, I understood. The beauty of our connection was not in the idealized fantasies we had conjured, but in the intricacies, the messiness of our truths intertwined. This wasn't a neatly wrapped story, it was still unfolding, an exquisite blend of highs and lows living in the breath between our words. As I lay in bed that night, the echoes of our conversation lingered, a tapestry woven from threads of joy, fear, longing, and relief. No longer was I drifting off to sleep solely wrapped in thoughts of unrealized fantasies. Instead, I was cradled by the promise of an authentic journey ahead, one where nightmares didn't hold dominion over my dreams. In that acceptance, amidst the cacophony of life's beautiful chaos, I felt free. The stars outside shone brightly, as if nodding along to my revelations, and I surrendered to sleep, secure in the knowledge that every moment was a brushstroke on the canvas of my life, exactly as it was meant to be. There was a time when every evening was filled with laughter and warmth. I would return from work to the delightful scent of a home-cooked meal, the soft glow of candlelight, and my partner Riley, who greeted me with a hug that seemed to melt my stress away. For the first few years of our marriage, we relished our shared passion for cooking, often experimenting with new recipes or recreating beloved dishes from our childhoods. I was content, and my genes fit just right, but as life often does, it tilted on its axis. It wasn't an overnight shift, more like a slowly creeping shadow, but over the span of a year, I found myself caught in a web of unexpected challenges. It began with Riley's demanding promotion at work, which came with longer hours and increased stress. I admired their resolve but found myself lonely in the evenings, eating alone more often than not. I'd started to raid the pantry, the fun of cooking fading as every meal alone felt progressively more like a chore. I justified my choices, telling myself it was just a phase, a temporary solace in the constant churn of responsibility. But then came the unwanted comfort of takeout, when all I wanted was to escape the silence of an empty house. A greasy box of fried rice or a cheesy pizza became the remedy, the only companion in my solitude. Strangely, I believe the more I indulged, the more I'd drown out the loneliness. The evenings that once blossomed into intimate dinners turned into binge-watching sessions filled with sugary snacks, deep into the night. I realized I was gaining weight not just from the food itself but from the emotional layers I layered in each slice of pizza or scoop of ice cream, a way of filling the void in my heart. Watching the numbers climb on the scale was sobering yet surreal, like looking at a stranger in the mirror. And yet, when I tried to confide in Riley, worried that my habits were outside the bounds of what we once shared, the truth felt more fragile than ever. They'd flash a quick smile, a fleeting appreciation for my vulnerability, but I could sense an undercurrent of discomfort in their eyes, as if the weight of my struggle only added to theirs. Our conversations turned less frequent, skirting around the budding tension we were both too scared to address. I was caught in a tug-of-war between wanting to reclaim my health and fearing the laughter would fade into something unrecognizable if I laid bare my reality. The sinking feeling in my stomach grew until one evening Riley returned home, their face crumpled with exhaustion from a long day. I had prepared a lavish dinner in a last-ditch effort to recover our connection, but instead of delight, I saw concern flaring in their hazel eyes. They asked gently but deeply, "Are you okay?" I crumbled before them, admitting how I felt engulfed by the weight of my habits, my loneliness, how I felt like I was disappearing into an identity I never intended to embody. The air shifted as if we both let go of our unspoken fears. There were tears and hard truths, but ultimately, we committed to each other to navigate this twisted path together, seeking joy in preparation and balance. In time, we resurrected our kitchen adventures, discovering new recipes that both invigorated our bodies and revived the lightness in our hearts. Neither of us is exactly where we want to be, but we've learned to be patient with ourselves and each other, holding our stories together without judgment, whispering those bittersweet confessions in the quiet of our home, wrapped in warmth and rediscovered laughter. I want to believe that the weight of this journey, both the loss and the gain, will continue to weave lessons that draw us closer. If you've ever wondered how to love during the struggle, look beyond the numbers, my friend, and perhaps you will find the heart of the matter. Update: a few months have passed since that vulnerable night. Our journey took a turn towards wellness, not only physically, but emotionally as well. The weight on the scale has lessened, but what matters more is the weight of connection we've chosen to carry as a team. Riley and I have started to volunteer at a local food bank together every Saturday morning, finding joy in nourishing others while nurturing our relationship. I've learned that each step away from solitude into partnership creates a new recipe for resilience. There's magic in the connection, often unequaled by anything on a plate. If anything, those greasy takeout meals have evolved into afternoons sharing a picnic in the local park, filled with vibrant salads and hearty laughter that echoed into the sky. On those warm Saturday mornings, as the sun spilled golden light over the bustling activity of the food bank, I would often pause amidst the steady rhythm of packing and distributing meals to truly appreciate the moment. Riley and I would work side by side, our hands moving deftly through the boxes of food, exchanging soft smiles and laughter that seemed to wrap around us like a comforting blanket. It was during these hours of service that I discovered a newfound joy. It wasn't just a weekly chore, but a transformative experience that gradually unraveled the tightly wound complexities of the past. Every grain of rice we separated, every can of beans we packed, felt like a step away from the weight I once carried alone. I could see the glint of determination in Riley's eyes, and it ignited a spark within me. This wasn't just about shedding the physical weight I had accumulated but rather about lightening the emotional burden that had followed me for so long. In those reflective moments, I recalled those late nights, trapped in the cycle of mindless eating and isolation, where food served as a reluctant companion during my bouts of loneliness. I had never truly grasped how my relationship with food mirrored my relationship with people. Unable and unwilling to connect, I threw myself into self-indulgence. Yet here we were, Riley's hand brushing against mine as we shared stories of childhood memories tied to family dinners, laughter spilling out like the plentiful boxes of food surrounding us. It was a different kind of feast, sharing our vulnerabilities and dreaming of brighter futures over plates filled not just with vibrant salads but with hope and intention. As summer began to paint the park with lush hues of green, we found ourselves more inclined to leave the comfort of our home-cooked meals behind in favor of leisurely afternoons beneath the rustling trees. There was something so liberating about laying down the picnic blanket and unpacking lunch, free of the stress that once accompanied food. We had taken to experimenting with healthy recipes together, and the process itself became an adventure. We would stroll through the local farmer's market, picking out ripe avocados and fresh herbs, savoring the air laced with the aroma of baked bread and blooming flowers. Our shared experiences began to nourish us in ways I hadn't anticipated. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling week of work for both of us, I felt the familiar pang of anxiety creep in. I had stepped on the scale only to find a number I hadn't seen in a long while, and though I had tried to shake it off, the weight of that digit hung in the air, threatening to overshadow the joy I felt with Riley. I found myself retreating inward, worry spiraling like a whirlpool, and I could sense the change. Riley, ever perceptive, noticed my silence during a picnic, my mind racing with comparisons, doubts, and a precarious sense of failure. "Hey," Riley said softly, pulling a cluster of cherry tomatoes from our spread, "what's going on in that head of yours?" The concern in their voice snapped me back like a rubber band against skin. I hesitated, but the gentle nudging of their understanding eyes coaxed the truth out of me. I stepped on the scale. "I don't know how I feel about it," I whispered, the vulnerability stirring a wave of unease in my chest. To my surprise, Riley didn't dismiss my worry. Instead, they shifted closer, inputting warmth and acceptance into a moment where I might have anticipated judgment. It's okay to feel that way. But remember the journey we're on. It's not about the numbers. We're doing this together. And in that exchange, something shifted. For the first time, I realized that Riley wasn't just my anchor but my partner. There was an intertwining of our struggles and triumphs that made the journey so much richer. As we shared our fears and insecurities beneath the dappled sunlight, I found comfort in the shared humanity of struggles. Facing the truths laid bare, I understood that weight comes not just from the body but from the emotional baggage that clings to us. With every heartfelt conversation, every laugh shared over a simple meal, we were queuing up all those intricate layers of connection that overshadowed the fleeting discomfort of a number on a scale. As autumn approached, we made it a point to continue our tradition. Every weekend, we would dig deeper into treasured recipes, while each meal crafted blossomed with discovery and meaning. I transitioned to viewing food as a source of connection, establishing routines that nurtured not just our bodies, but also the bonds that fortified our hearts. The idea of weight shifted entirely. It morphed into a celebration of resilience, companionship, and perhaps most importantly, the magic of transformation. An update on our story came when Riley surprised me one early Saturday morning with a phone call. "Hey, I've got an idea that could spice things up for our volunteering." Their voice held excitement, and curiosity swirled within me as I listened. "What if we organized a community cook-off at the food bank? We can involve everyone we've met, share recipes, culture, and celebrate food as we have, but on a larger scale, allowing them a chance to share their stories too." A thrill of ideas cascaded within me. Naturally, I threw myself into the project with gusto, helping to plan out details and gather ingredients. So, when the day finally arrived, a sense of pride bloomed within me as I watched the community come together, laughter echoing in the harvested sunlight, stories flowing as flowingly as the various dishes that filled each table. Riley and I exchanged satisfied glances amidst the fray, our hands gripping tightly as we relished this moment that seemed to signify a milestone in our journey, a festival committed to connection, nurtured through the ingredients of love, support, and resilience. I realized the true measure of weight isn't found on a scale, but in the richness of relationships we foster along the way. It's in the laughter that resonates in our memories and the connections that nourish our deepest selves, an intricate tapestry woven together one experience at a time. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the bustling festival grounds, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the path Riley and I had carved out together. The laughter of children spun joyfully in the air, drifting past the aromatic stalls filled with local produce, arts, and crafts. It was a community united in celebration, where each vendor wore a smile as bright as the colors of their wares. I couldn't help but breathe deeply, taking in the savory scents wafting from the food stalls, barbecue smoke mingling with sweet notes of freshly baked pastries. With every passing moment, I savored not just the comforting flavors that tasted of home, but also the warmth of Riley's hand in mine, our fingers interlaced like the vines wrapping around the nearby oak trees. When we made our way over to a small booth selling homemade jam, the elderly woman behind the counter welcomed us with a twinkling smile. Her hands were calloused yet gentle as she showed us the vibrant labels, each depicting a different fruit imbued with stories of sun-soaked days and summer whispers. "This one's made from the first strawberries of spring," she said, her voice nostalgic as she handed us a small sample. As we tasted the sweet spread, I could see Riley's face light up, and in that moment, I was reminded of how far we had come, how filling our lives with love and connection was beginning to replace the emptiness that once sat heavy in my own heart. After a leisurely stroll through the festival, we settled on a patch of grass beneath a sprawling sycamore tree, its branches offering a comforting canopy. Riley unpacked our homemade picnic, a collection of vibrant salads and hearty sandwiches, all crafted from ingredients we had picked up together at the food bank's community garden. The sun filtered through the leaves, dappled light playing on our faces as we shared bites and stories, laughter spilling between us like an uncontainable river. "You know," Riley began, crossing her legs beneath her, "it's strange to think how food used to connect us in a different way, isn't it? Like, I remember all the late-night takeout and how it was always more about escaping the day than really celebrating anything." I nodded, understanding all too well how those nights were often marked by solitude and the clinking of takeout containers rather than warmth and conversation. "Yeah," I replied softly, "it's almost like we used food to fill the spaces we didn't know how to navigate emotionally." We were both silent for a moment, the hum of festival laughter in the distance grounding us as we processed those feelings. It was liberating to acknowledge our past without letting it define us. Riley reached out and placed her palm on my cheek, bringing my gaze back to her. But look at us now, creating new memories, giving new meaning to those moments. That's what it's about, right? Learning to nourish ourselves in every sense of the word. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of hope and determination, emboldening me to step further into this newfound journey with her. With dusk settling in, the festival exploded to life with flickering lights strung across the trees, illuminating the path of laughter and connection all around us. We moved from stall to stall, sharing bites of gourmet grilled cheese and sipping on fresh apple cider as the sky transformed into a canvas of purples and blues. Every moment felt imbued with the lessons we had learned, the importance of intentionally, of savoring not just food but the quiet magic woven into relationships. And in that bustling atmosphere, it dawned on me just how much I had been missing, how easy it had been to get lost in my own solitude, yet how deeply transformative it was to lay aside old habits and embrace vulnerability. As we leaned against each other on a bench, our bellies full and hearts even fuller, I knew that this was just the beginning. In my heart, I felt a shift, an understanding that life was not just about the meals we shared but also the people who enriched those moments, who brought flavor and vibrancy to the everyday. Our journey together echoed the very essence of a bustling market, a beautiful blend of the familiar and the unexplored, the laughter of a newfound connection taking center stage in our lives. Later, as the sounds of the festival faded and the stars twinkled brightly above, I came to realize that the joy of our partnership would continue to thrive. I turned to Riley. I can't imagine doing this without you. This feels too right. She smiled, leaning in closer, the warmth of her body providing both comfort and strength as she whispered, "We're in this together, always." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in, a vow of sorts, echoing the harmony we had woven into our lives through love, resilience, and the steady rhythm of shared moments. The true measure of weight was indeed not confined to a scale, but rather the delightful burden of connection we carried, woven tightly with each experience we chose to embrace.